Hello, hi, welcome to the Voice Note by the Culturelist. It is me, it is I, writer, journalist, pop culture observer, bibliophile, reader of books, proponent of the Oxford comma. It's me, Maan Jalal. If you are listening to this on the Culturelist Substack, you can head over to YouTube now and you can see me talking to you on camera. Hello, hi, it's me. If you are on YouTube and you're watching this, hello, hi. I'm Manjalal. I'm from The Culturelist. Make sure you like and subscribe, and you can head over to The Culturelist. There's a link below on Substack, and you can like and subscribe there as well. I decided to go visual with the voice note and try this out. I mean, usually it's just audio, but I thought, you know what? We live in a multi-medium world. I might as well like try the video thing as well and talk. Because, yeah, I don't know. Just because I have nothing else to say. So, for those of you who are new here, probably thinking, okay, this is kind of like a weird way to present yourself. But the point of the voice note, which is my podcast on the Culturalist, is that I just want to talk. I don't want to, it's like a stream of consciousness kind of vibe where I don't want to over edit the content that I'm giving in a podcast. Not only is it incredibly time consuming, okay, it's incredibly time consuming, and that's the reason. I just kind of want to talk how I would talk when I send a voice note to my friends when I'm speaking about films or novels or books or, pop culture. And I kind of want to have the same vibe here. I don't know how this is going to work in a visual sense because I know on YouTube, especially when people are doing recaps and things, most people like, I guess, very, I don't know, clean, like very edited stuff. I mean, I'm not editing anything. This will probably look very janky. I'm just gonna record and like fix the lighting color so I don't look washed out, and then I post. So this is what you're getting. You're getting a conversation with me, Manjalal, hello, where we talk about all the things that I love in the pop culture world, facets of pop culture across films, TV, books, novels, stories, history, all of that stuff. Anyway, here's why I'm actually here. This is why I'm doing this very important episode. I have finally seen it. I have finally watched it. The Avatar Last Airbender film. I watched it last night on Paramount Plus. It was incredible. Now, I know for all of the Avatar fans out there, this felt important for us. Like especially this past year with all of the drama that happened with the show and the film. I won't get into all of that here, but it just felt good. Like I'm a huge fan, right? I watched the 3 seasons on Nickelodeon. I've seen it a million times. I have read some of the novels. I have read some of the comics. I have, I watched the film that we don't speak of. I watched even the season of the series of Korra, which is, whatever. I also watched the Netflix live action series, and I have episodes on the voice note dedicated to that, which you can watch on the Culturalist Substack. So I am invested. I am invested, and I have been very excited about this film, and I could not wait to watch it and come here and talk to you guys about it. Now, before I begin, a couple of house rules. I write everything down, and so a lot of the times I'll be looking through my notes to talk about stuff. So there'll be some pauses. So if you're not used to that, I don't know what to tell you. Again, I am not going to be editing this in a crazy way. Um, but I Oh, yes. So, spoilers. There will be spoilers here. I'm warning you. So, if you have not seen the film yet, I implore you to press pause, go watch the film, and come back and unpause and listen to me rant and rave and talk about my thoughts and feelings about this. But if you have seen it, welcome, hello, hi. We can get into it. So, you have been warned about the spoilers. Now, I want to start off by talking about my expectation for what I wanted from this film. Okay, I wanted something that felt like what should have been a season 4 because like many Avatar fans, we felt like we deserved a season 4. Like 3 seasons for a brilliant show like that were definitely not enough. So I wanted season 4, something that felt like a fourth season, something that felt familiar, where I would see Team Avatar together again, but also something new, something that gives us a new story or a new something that we didn't know. And I feel like the film touched on all of those things. It ticked the boxes for all of those things. That's why I think overall it is a brilliant film because it scratched that itch of what a season 4 would have looked like looked like, and they did it as a film, which is great. Now, the story. We'll start there. What I loved about the film is that it had a very clear beginning, middle, and end, and a very clear character arc for our hero, our protagonist, Aang, which is a very, you would think this would be the basic thing one should expect from a film, or from a story, but one will be surprised how many books, how many shows, how many films seem to forget this very important foundational story telling element: beginning, middle, and end, character arc. And I think we got that with this film. And I'm not surprised because these creators are brilliant when it comes to the storytelling of Aang. So I'm very happy. I was very happy from that perspective. Now we begin the story with the past. We see Aang as a young kid, 12 or whatever old he was, um, with the air nomads. He's flying on his bison in Appa. Gyatso's there, and it's very beautiful. It's very picturesque. It's very utopian. And then all of a sudden, there's fire, and Aang is trying to escape the fire, and he's running away, and he's feeling guilty, and he wakes up from a dream. And Aang is not a child anymore. He is a young 20 something or a late teenager. And it was interesting seeing him in live action form in that way. I know we saw a bit of him like that in Korra, but he was much older. It felt like Aang. The animation felt like it was Aang. The mannerisms, the way he looks, the way he talks, all of that, it felt like Aang. A little bit more serious, but it felt like Aang. And he is haunted by this dream. And I think this sets the tone for the rest of the film. I understood what this film was about. It was about Aang reconciling his grief and his guilt, two very separate things. His guilt for running away and leaving the air nomads when he found out he was the Avatar because he was scared, and his grief that he did that, and his grief that the air nomad culture no longer exists, that he is the last airbender ever. And even though this theme was touched upon in this show in season 1 and 2 and 3, he never really had the chance to really wallow in it or explore that because he had bigger things to think about, right? He was trying to end the 100-Year War. He was trying to conquer learn all master all the elements, and he was fighting the Fire Lord. There was a lot of stuff going on. And also, I think when you're that young, right? He was 12, 13, 14. You're not really thinking about these things that deeply as they happen. You're kind of just navigating through them. But now that the 100-Year War is over, now that things are settling and they're building Republic City, and he has time with himself to think. There is no immediate massive danger. What does what does happen? What does happen? What happens to one? One goes internal. One starts to think about the past and reliving the past and reconciling and rehashing old feelings. So it made sense to me, and I think it was very clever that this was the moment that Aang is trying to think about his life and his past and his mistakes and what could have been, and grieve who he could have been and his culture. So from there, we see that Aang is collecting air nomad relics, and he is going to this old air nomad tower where he's placing the air relics that he's collected. And I thought this part of his character, or this part of his profession, shall we say, was really interesting because what better way to reconnect with your past, to make sure that your culture lives on in some way, shape, or another, than to archive it, than to, be basically an archaeologist and try to discover more of it and to save it. And I thought that was a very cool element of Aang's personality, and it connects to his grief and his guilt. Um, but when he's in the tower, he's placing this new stone sculpture he's found of a avatar he's never heard of, Avatar Sonam. He places it among his collection, and then these people attack him, non-benders that are called the Denied. And they are non-benders who are angry and vengeful, and they want power. And they're fighting Aang. Well, they're fighting Aang, but Aang isn't fighting them straight away. It's interesting that even as a young adult now, he is doing the same thing that he did before, which is evading attack. He doesn't want to attack. He wants to talk first, right? Um, and only until he absolutely has to does he attack and fight them. Especially the fact that they're in this tower. There's a lot of old relics. He doesn't want to destroy them. Now they are after the sculpture of Sonam, and he doesn't understand why they're after it. They're fighting, and then there's this one girl who he saves, and she feels bad about attacking him. And when he falls and he's out of it, the sculpture breaks, and there's a map inside that the Denied take, and they run off. And then the tower starts to fall. Aang wakes up. And this is where we see Aang for the first time in the film really using the full force of his bending power as a fully realized avatar. He is using airbending to the top maximum of his ability, where he is basically lifting this tower that's falling and placing it back on its foundations. And it was so cool to see him using his air bending power to the fullest as a grown adult. But at that moment as well, we see that he's exhausted. He becomes tired. Like Appa has to carry him and save him. And it makes us realize that Aang, even as a full realized avatar, who very talented airbender, has limitations to his power. I think this is a very important thing to remember as we move on to the story, that there are limitations to power. Anyway, he flies back to Republic City, which is being built, and we're seeing this beautiful city that is all about unity and welcoming all of the different nations, all different kind of benders and non-benders to live in this like utopia. And Katara, who is doing a speech about the opening of Unity Tower, is there, and it's nice to see them together as a couple. And that it's interesting that she is kind of like a political voice, which is I'm not surprised because in the season in the show that she was kind of that. So he tells her what happens as she's healing him from his injuries. And um, when she's healing him, we see that he has the scar from season two, where Azula punctured him. Was it Azula or was it in season one? No, sorry, I apologize. Season one, when he was in the Avatar state, and I can't remember what happens, but he has that scar, which again, it's like a reminder, a visual reminder that he's been through a lot, and again, a visual reminder that there is a limitation to power. So she's worried, Katara, as she's like, I can't believe these people are willing to kill you. They don't care about you, and you're the Avatar. Like, we have to be careful. He was like, I need to figure out who this Sonam Avatar is. Like, I need to find out who she is because they wanted something from her. So he goes into the avatar, not avatar state, but goes back and speaks to his, past lives to gain information about potentially who Sonam is. But all of the avatars don't know who Sonam is, and they were like, "We never heard of her," and they're like, "It's like she never existed." Until he comes across one avatar, an Earthbender, who was quite funny actually, um, called I think Avatar Xiao. I think that's how you say his name. And hang on a second, did I miss anything? Uh, 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 uh. Okay, so Avatar Xiao tells him Avatar Sonam was the avatar during the golden age of airbending. She had a kingdom that she was ruling, and she had this really powerful staff that is from the spirit world, and we don't know what it does, but it was incredibly powerful, and it like channels energy from the spirit world, and it was amazing. But we don't know what happened to her, where she is, because none of the other avatars can have ever been able to connect with her. It's like she never existed. And if you want to find anything about her, you have to go to the place where she was last seen, which is Mount Baihu. So if you go there, you might have some clues to where she is there. And Aang makes the conclusion that, oh, the denied must have a map to her to where she has the staff. They must want the staff because they want the ultimate power. So let me go to this mountain, which is probably where the staff is, so I can stop them and get the staff. So he comes out of this avatar state, and Katara is asleep. He doesn't wake her up to tell her that he's leaving to this like potentially dangerous mission, which I think is a little bit odd. And he sends these messages to Toph, Zuko, and Sokka. And he flies off to basically let's all meet and go on this adventure. And he flies off to Mount Baihu. Baihu? Yeah. Um, and it was cool because we see the messages fly off to all these people, and we get to see all of them in their realms, right? Sokka's in Southern Water Tribe, and he's like teaching young people, which is something he's always loved doing, like how to be a warrior. And he's still like funny. He still feels like he's the most one that's like himself. So is Toph actually. Toph is in an Earth Kingdom teaching metal bending to Earthbenders, and she's still like the greatest Earthbender in the world. And Zuko is in a big, massive, you know, very formal setting of a palace where he is the Fire Lord. And Zuko, I was a bit surprised by that because I haven't really kept up with exactly Zuko's story arc after season 3 of the show. So I don't know. I was just surprised to see him in such a formal situation, formal place. I thought maybe he would have changed things in the Fire Nation, but whatever. It was cool seeing them all in their separate realms, and then them all flying to meet Aang. In the meantime, Aang is in Mount, how do you say it? Mount Baihu, and he finds that he climbs it all the way up the top. He's exhausted. He's bending. Blah blah blah. He goes up to the top and he sees that there is an someone frozen in ice in a similar formation as when he was frozen in ice for 100 years. So he uses his bending to release him. And it's interesting that he uses air bending to release him, as opposed to using any of the other elements like fire or water, which he could have used to help, you know, unfreeze this guy. And I think it's to do some kind of, maybe I could be wrong, but I felt like he was, saving an airbender who was trapped in ice like he was, and he only used airbending. I felt like there was something interesting about that. Anyway, so this person comes out of this spiritual sleeping coma thing, and the mountain starts to shake and fall, and Avatar Aang, why am I calling him that? Aang saves him, grabs him, and he does some cool bending, and they're trying to fly through as this mountain is falling. And at some point, this frozen airbender wakes up, air nomad wakes up, and he does some bending. And then Aang was like, oh my God, he's an actual airbender. So as they're leaving, they see Team Avatar on Appa, who capture them. Who capture them? Who save them. So now they are healing. Katara is healing this frozen airbender. And it was a cool scene because we get to see the whole team together, right? We haven't seen them together since the show, and it was nice to hear their banter, like Toph saying that this frozen airbender smells good because he probably is good looking, and everyone's like, "Oh, is he?" And Sokka's too embarrassed to say, and Katara doesn't really want to say anything about it. And Zuko's the one who's like, "Yeah, he is quite good looking. He's got good bone structure. It's all in the bone structure." I thought that was like a really funny scene, and I wish there was actually more of that. I'll get into that later. So anyway, this airbender wakes up and he's in shock, and he for a second wants to attack Toph because she's an earthbender, which tells us that he's from a completely different time, and his tattoos, Aang says, are very like ancient. So this bender calls himself Taga and tells Aang and the others that in his time he was a non-bender follower of Avatar Sonam, and she had the staff that she got from the spirit world, or she fashioned from the spirit world, that can channel the energy of the spirit world, and she used it to give non-benders the power to bend air specifically. And she had these airbenders that she would send out to spread peace to the world, and so she was creating airbenders to do that. And he is the first person she ever did that to. So he was a non-bender, and she gave him airbending power. And he doesn't remember what happened. There was like a fight with the Earth Kingdom, and blah 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 blah. He's frozen. And when he tells Aang this, Aang is like elated because he realizes that if he can get his hands on this powerful staff, he can revive airbending to people, and he can revive his culture. And it's like a very happy moment, and Team Avatar are happy for him. And I think it's important for Aang because I think at this point, he believes that by doing that, he is ridding himself of the guilt of running away, and he is releasing the grief of the past by reviving and letting his culture live again through this. Like this is the key for him to be free of guilt and grief if he gets the staff and he revives airbending. So they set off, and what's his name? Taga tells them, "Listen, I know where she hid her staff. It is in past the endless sea on this island, which was like her spiritual like what's it called? Her spiritual recluse place where she would like where she learned bending." So they set off, and they take Zuko's airship. Now it's cool because when Taga sees the airship, he's like shocked, he's surprised because he's never seen a machine like this before because he's like thousands of years old or hundreds of years old or whatever. And I like that because it's a reminder of how clever and good this world building is. It shows you that across time, despite there being magic and bending, technology has also shifted over time. And we saw that in the season of Korra and how much technology had changed from Aang's time. And I think that's like a rare thing because a lot of magical fantasy stories, whether they're novels or films or TV shows, always sort of discount that. They just think, okay, there's magic, that's enough. Because there's magic, there's no one who's going to be thinking in terms of technology. Like technology is inferior, so no one is really going to put time and effort into thinking about how to advance technology because magic will always rule the world. It's a superior form of wielding energy as opposed to technology. But here we see alongside bending, technology has also advanced over time. And it's an important element actually of fighting in the film. So anyway, they go on the airship, and as they are going towards this, endless flying through the endless lane, going to this island, Aang and Taga bond. So Taga teaches Aang some air bending tricks that he never knew about. So this weird thing where they can basically like fly in the air by channeling each other's energies, and they're like kind of somersaulting or boomeranging, in the words of Sokka, in the sky by sharing energy. And we see that Aang is really excited to learn more about his culture through an old airbender. And then they're having this conversation about the past. And Aang asks him, well, what happened to you? Why were you frozen? He goes, like, I can't remember. There was an Earth Kingdom, the Earth Kingdom was fighting and they were taking over. And that's what last thing I remember. And, I think Sonam must have made me, put me in that ice bubble thing. And Aang tells him, well, she must have really cared about you and she wanted to save you. And that's why she did it. So that's when Taga asks him, you fought the Fire Nation because they killed our kind, they killed our people, but now you're friends with Zuko, the Fire Lord. How is that possible? And then Aang explains to him, like, he taught me bending and he betrayed his father for me, and we're all stronger together. We are a unit. And Taga seems like very alien to this idea. And then he tells him, you remind me so much of Avatar Sonam. And oh, we're supposed to read this as a good thing, but I could tell that something's a little bit strange about Taga. Like his perspective, I get it, like he's from a different world, different time. So his perspective on this kind of stuff is a little bit different. It's not he it seems alien to him. And yeah, that's when I start to suspect, like, oh, he's not everything he seems to be. Um So then, as they're going across the endless sea, they reach this part, which is called like the immortal storm, which is basically this like massive section of clouds that they have to go through. And in them is like hundreds of tornadoes. Now, they didn't know that that was there. Like, Taga never told them, red flag number two. Um, and so they have to navigate through it. Now, as they go into it, there's all these tornadoes. Aang and Taga like fly off using their like new air bending thing to clear the way by going into tornadoes and like basically switching them off, like turning off their essence and clearing the way. But at the same time, there's like lightning and all this stuff happening, and the ship is struck by lightning and there's a big gash in it. And so Sokka, Toph, Zuko, and Katara have to work to make sure the ship doesn't fall into the ocean. So Toph is using her metal bedding to close the gash. Um, what's her name? Katara is bending the water so they don't fall into the water. Zuko is using his bending to control the fire so they can like work the steamship engine. And Aang is using his humor and his like aviation skills to control the ship. Now, what I loved about that is that it's showing you like these three powerful benders and a non-bender all working together to survive, right? The whole point of Republic City and this new world of all the nations working together. Aang is clearing the way for them so they can find their way, which is like very symbolic of the Avatar and who Aang is. But at the same time, at some point when him and Taga are, um, you know, killing these tornadoes, he loses sight of his friends and he says, I can't see them, let's turn back. And Taga tells him, no, trust your friends, let's like keep going forward. And I felt like this was symbolic in two ways. Like he should trust his friends, he can't save them all the time, but also Taga is leading him away from the things from the present and leading him more deeply into airbending, the fight for airbending culture that is taking Aang away from everything he's fought for so far. Anyway, they pass through this like endless storm, and back on the ship, Katara is upset. She's angry. She's like, "You are so careless. Why didn't you tell us about the endless storm?" He's like, "I didn't know." And she's like, "You're the Avatar. Well, you cannot die." And that was like a really interesting reality check because in the show, Aang was always doing crazy stuff and always trying to fight the Fire Lord and their enemies and doing risky things because they had to win the 100-Year War. They had to kill or stop the Fire Lord. But now that's all over. Like, it's more important now than ever that Aang is alive to be a symbol of the people and to maintain balance. If he dies now at this young age, everything they've worked for will, is at the risk of being of disappearing, of collapsing, because the Avatar cycle will begin again. So it's really important that he cannot actually be that risque sometimes and do crazy things, because if he dies, it's all over. Again, it's like a limitation of power. Like, he has to remember his mortality. He has to remember that he cannot do everything. Um, and also, I wondered whether Katara was also not just talking about his death, like physically, but his death, like emotionally or spiritually, because he's being seduced by Taga and Taga's philosophy, right? So there was like, I felt like there was like double meanings there. But anyway, Taga intervenes and he says, "Guys, I'm really sorry. It's my fault. Don't blame Aang. It was me. I'm the one who should have told you guys about this. I didn't. I convinced Aang that we keep doing this, blah, blah, blah." This is where I thought, yeah, definitely for sure. This guy is evil because he's like very political. He diffused the situation very cleverly and he put himself to blame. And I thought that was very shrewd of him. And I'm like, okay, this guy is dodgy. Red flag number three, two or three. Anyway, red flag. So they get to the island, which is actually islands, which is actually made up of the carcasses of the turtle lions, sea lions, turtle lions, whatever. And this is where Sonam used to go to learn her spiritual whatever bending. So they get there, and as they land, Taga wants to go with Aang to find the staff. And Katara's like, "Actually, no. Can you stay with us and help us fix the ship so we have a way to go back?" And I felt like Katara was doing that because she doesn't trust him alone with Aang. And he was like, "No, I want to go with Aang." And then Aang is like, "No, no, no, you stay with them. I'll get it myself." I kind of wanted all of them to go and get the stuff because it would feel more like an adventure, and it echoes back to season 1 and 2 and 3 of the show. But anyway, Aang goes off, and this is where things get interesting. He gets to this area, this like space, where he has to use all four bending elements to open this, open this coffin or whatever you want to call it, this basement where the stuff appears. And as he's doing that, at the same time happening, um, Katara's like, "Where's Tunga? I can't find him." They're like, "We don't know." So she realizes he's gone off to find Aang. So she uses like water bending to travel, which is very cool. And she finds him and confronts him. And she's like, "What are you doing? Why are you going after Aang? Like, he can do it on his own." And he's like, "No, he needs my help." And they get into a confrontation where basically he tells her, "I don't want you guys around. Aang has one weakness, and it's you." And they start fighting. And the others, Toph, Zuko, and Sokka, join in, and what's his face? Taga fights them all simultaneously, beats them, and kills them. It looks like he kills all of them with his airbending, and it shows you what a powerful airbender he is. Like, he is using air in such a violent way that he can kill them, kill like three powerful benders and a powerful fighter. At the same time, Aang is about to grab on and holding on to the staff and getting its, whatever, owning it, claiming it, basically. And I really love that dual like scenes that are happening where the climax is really, really rising. The Avatar has always done this like very well. And so then Taga goes to Aang. Aang doesn't know what Taga has done. And then Aang is holding on to the staff, and it's like this like yellow golden light. And then Taga's like, kind of like, "Oh, give it to me. I want it." And he's like, "No, we can do it together." He's like, "No, I want to do it." As soon as he grabs the staff turns red. And it just shows us at this point that the staff is not like this spiritually powerful good thing. It is a neutral weapon that can channel power. And depending on who controls it, is depends on the kind of power it can wield, good power or evil power. And in this case, it's, dark, malicious power because what's his face? Taga is holding it, and the light has turned red. And Taga attacks Aang and tells him, I would have loved to have done this with you, but we need to create a new kingdom of air nomads. We need to bring the air nomads back, and we need to be, you know, powerful. We need to oppress everybody else. We need to be supreme over everybody else. We need to suppress everybody else. And they fight, and Aang is like loses. He's kind of no match for this spiritual for what's his face, Taga with his like special airbending powers and the staff, and he kills. It seems like he's killed Aang. I'm gonna pause for a second because I need a glass of water. Okay, I'm back. So what I thought was interesting here through Taga was realizing that even though the air nomads are a culture that are about peace and spreading peace and enlightenment, and they're not really fighters, that even in that culture that is so spiritually aware, you have extremists who believe in being supreme to others, having like a supremacy complex and being extremists. And Taga is a personification of that, right? So he is an evil air nomad. Now, we think Aang is dead, or, supposedly dead. And he is now in this dark space that feels like the Avatar space, but not. But he's there with Avatar Soman's spirit, and she tells him what actually happened. So Avatar Sonam sent out her air nomads to spread peace around the world and be mediators, but they were not prepared for how brutal the Earth Kingdom was. And the Earth Kingdom slaughtered and killed so many of the air nomads, and Taga witnessed so many of his brothers and sisters like being killed in this way. So he returns full of grief and vengeance, and he wants Avatar Sonam to like use her staff and her power to seek revenge and like create a war. Of course, she refuses, and so he decides to take the staff for himself. But once he holds the staff and the energy of the spirit world passes through him, because he's filled and consumed with grief and rage, it turns him into this like monster that she doesn't even know what it is. And at the same time, the Earth Kingdom decides to attack the air nomads and this kingdom. And so she stops him. She tells the air nomads to flee to the mountains. She traps Taga into ice, and then she takes her special like spiritual area of her altar into the spirit world and buries the staff in the island. So she separates all these different elements so they can't come together, and the staff is like unattainable to everyone. And she goes to the spirit world, dies there in shame, and that's why she's kind of stuck in the spirit world and not part of the Avatar like link system. And Aang tells her what happens, and she's like, oh my god, you have to stop him, because if he gets a hold of the staff, we're basically screwed. So when he asks her how to do that, he wakes up because Katara has healed him. And we thought Katara was dead. She's actually healed everyone. And this is where, again, the storytelling and the world building is so clever and interesting. Katara was able to save everyone because she is, she's a healer and waterbender and a healer. But the waters in the island here, because it's a very spiritual place, they have like stronger spiritual properties. So they're able to heal people who are, I guess, on the brink of death. And I thought that was very clever because it didn't feel like a convenient way to save everybody. It made sense to the myth and legend and the lore and the actual, spiritual practices of this world. And I think that's why I like that the details all work towards the storytelling and the plot, and nothing feels like it's by chance. Everything is sort of connected in a way that makes sense, which is sometimes very difficult to do in a fantasy world. Okay, so now they're all together, and it's nice because none of them are blaming Aang for what happened. They understand because I guess they understand why he was seduced by Taga and his philosophy, because he again is trying to link back to his culture and his past. Anyway, they need to leave. So Aang decides to call on the ocean spirit, which was from season one. It was very cool to see that, and use the ocean spirit to create a portal into the spiritual world, to the spirit world, so they can travel through to where Sonam's, like her area, her tower, whatever you want to call it, her isle. So Aang calls on the ocean spirit, which was very cool because ocean spirit is from season one in Avatar on the Last Airbender series, and it was cool to see him again, or her, or the spirit. And this ocean spirit creates a portal for them to enter the spirit world, and it was a really nice scene because Aang says, I'm going to go into the spirit world, and then Katara reminds him, no, we're doing this all of us together, and it's like a continuous theme, right? A continuous message from season one until now of them always doing things together, that Aang is never alone, that he has his friends. So they go into the spirit world and everything's out of whack. And I felt like all the characters changed, the way they look changed. So Sokka is a teenager, and Toph is a baby, and Zuko and what's her name, Kitara are old people, and Aang is how we know him and season one, like a young teenager. And I felt like all of them embodied who they really are inside, whether it means that they were wise or childish, or like in Aang's case, I think the moment his life changed. But anyway, that happens because the spirit world is out of balance because Taga has started his war, basically, and they run into this spirit called Gorillavark. I don't know how to say that, Gorillavark, who has just fallen off this area, the Isle of Sonam, which is being taken into the physical world, into Republic City, and they convince him to let him take them up there. He does, and as they are entering the physical world and Public City, um, Taga has emboldened the denied. He has given them air nomad powers and told them to do his bidding, destroy a public city, and so they can build a new air nomad kingdom and like rule the world. So Team Avatar go and fight the denied with their new air power bending ability, and Aang is facing Taga one on one. They start fighting, and Taga is trying to get to put his staff into the isle that has come down from the spirit world, because once he does that, he can directly channel the energy from the spirit world. Anyway, he does it, and as the energy comes to the staff, he changes into this like monstrous kind of version of himself. And that sort of took me a bit out of the story, because I feel like the way he looked, what he morphed into, felt a bit too cartoonish, a bit too caricaturish for me. Because at this point, the animation felt very serious but accessible. It was beautiful, but it didn't feel childish. But this felt a bit childish. I don't know. I don't know why. Anyway, he has this incredible spiritual power. He's fighting Aang, but Aang then uses the one of the airbending techniques that Taga taught him earlier against Taga in that moment. And through that, he's able to grab hold onto the staff, and then he places the staff into the isle or whatever it is and gains this spiritual energy. And he's transformed into like an avatar of himself, almost like a greater version of himself while he's in the avatar state. Now, that looked cool from an animated perspective. He looked very formidable and very scary. Whereas whereas Taga just looked more cartoonish. Anyway, so he has this immense power, and Taga is no match for him. So Aang starts attacking him, and we realize, like, okay, he is actually kind of corrupt. The power of the staff, the energy that's coming from the spirit world, is corrupting him, and it's feeding off like the worst parts of him. And he's about to give Taga the final blow. And I paused my thinking for a second because I'm like, okay, this is interesting. Now, um, in season three, when Aang fights a Fire Lord and he's face to face, and as we know, Aang doesn't believe in murder. He's a vegetarian. He was raised by the monks, but he has to kill at some point. But when he's faced with the Fire Lord, he doesn't kill him. He takes his bending away, the thing that makes a Fire Lord incredibly powerful. And it was a very clever move where Aang can restore balance to the world, show that he is a important, formidable force, an avatar, while still being true to his beliefs. They can't do that again. He can't, with all this power, then take the bending away from Taga. It just wouldn't make sense from a story perspective. Like, it'll just be a bit like, oh, okay, that's going to be your thing now. You just take people's bending away all the time. Like, he did that once because the lion turtles taught him that. I don't know if it's something that he can do over and over again. So I thought, okay, how is he going to kill this guy? He's not going to murder him. That's not really Aang's way. He can't take away his bending. And the second thing I thought, like, he is deeply immersed in this avatar state and being corrupted by the spiritual energy, right, from the staff. And in the show, in the series, whenever he was deep in the avatar state, it was Katara who could take him out of it. He would hear her voice, she would touch his hand, he would see her face, and he would bring him back and remember the boundaries of his own power, that he cannot be almighty all the time and be like just this, conduit of power, creating chaos and havoc. He's about balance. So I was like, well, how is he going to get out of this? And what the creators did, I should have maybe guessed it, but it was so clever and so good. So he, in that moment, there's a flashback and he's in a memory or in like a spiritual state where he's back to his childhood and he's with his friends and they're in the fields and they're running. And then he sees, and then we see Gyatso's hand on the back of Avatar Aang's head, and it was a very touching moment. And then Gyatso tells Aang, "You will do so many great things as the Avatar, but you must be prepared to do what frightens you the most. Your people, your home, we are always with you." And Aang starts to cry. And it was such a wonderful emotional moment because he remembered the values, he remembered who he is, he remembered what the air nomads are about, and he also gets some closure. He remembers that he he can reconcile, he has to forgive himself, and that bringing back the air nomads, he doesn't have to bring back new air nomads to remember who he is. And what he does then is he breaks the staff. And this is such a powerful thing to do because for Aang, the staff was his path to closure, was his path to, reconcile his past and to rid himself of guilt and to stop the grieving. And that could have worked had he been able, if it hadn't happened and he was able to bring back air nomads and let the air nomad culture live again, it could have done that. But he chose not to do that. He chose not to do what felt easy because the power of the staff is too tempting and it has so much potential for evil. And so he broke the staff to do what's right for the greater good than to do what he needed to rid himself of grief and guilt, which I think is a really powerful lesson, a very powerful moment. So when he does that, all of the power of the staff goes, right. So all of the new air nomads, their power disappears, and Taga's power is disappearing, and he's disintegrating into nothing. He's basically dying, and he tells Aang like, "Why did you do that?" And Aang tells him in this really powerful moment, like, we cannot save the past. We have to move on. And he actually says, um, we can't, you have to forgive yourself. I had to forgive myself too. So this is the moment where Aang finally moves on. He forgives himself. Um, and it was really beautiful. And then, uh, what's her name? Katara jumps off Appa and flies or falls, soars towards Aang, and they're in midair for a while. And it really reminded me of Spirited Away, Hayao Miyazaki's Spirited Away, when Shikiro realizes and gives Haru his name, and he remembers who he is, and they're soaring through the sky. Actually, there's a few moments in this film that I think are really influenced by Hayao Miyazaki and Studio Ghibli, which was really, really beautiful. So, I mean, I'll talk about that in a minute. So, they are now rebuilding Republic City, and the film ends in a really wonderful way, and it shows that Aang is talking to Avatar Sonam, and he tells her like the way that air nomads can live is if we make sure their values continue. And so he has now these Arulites, so like followers of air nomad values, and they're going on expeditions to find like old, air temples and to find old relics. And he goes to this relic that Avatar Sonam tells him, and there they find like a field full of air bisons. And they thought like Appa was the last one. It was like really cool seeing Appa flying with them and seeing that the air bisons have survived and that there's hope for the air nomads in the future. And like that's where the film ends. So it was really a really, really beautiful ending to this film and a really beautiful character arc, like I said, of at the beginning, Aang is riddled with guilt and grief, and he's trying to figure out how to do that. And he is willing to do like extreme things until he realizes like this is not the way, this is not the values that I know, and I have to reconcile, I have to forgive myself. Like I think that is like a very beautiful arc, and it's done so well through the storytelling. Um, so it was a very satisfying watch, but there were some things that I thought the film lacked a little bit. So definitely more humor. I feel like we I loved about the show is that it combined humor and really powerful, strong storytelling and epic scenes and vulnerability and tenderness and darkness. There were some funny bits. Toph was really funny. She had like a crush on Taga at first because she thought he was really good looking. Sokka's always funny, but Aang wasn't as goofy as he usually is. I get it was like a dark story with like strong themes and very heavy emotions, but they could have had some more funnier bits. The film could have been longer. The film could have we could have been with them longer. They could have It was so action packed, which was great, but I wanted some more moments of them just being together. I also felt there wasn't enough of Zuko. Zuko was there, but he wasn't really there. Like there wasn't that many scenes with him by himself. Or I would have loved the scene between Zuko and Aang where they're talking about because Zuko also has a checkered past, and whether Aang had talked to him about like reconciling and guilt and running away and all that stuff. But there wasn't that, and I think the film would have been a bit better if they had that. Um, but honestly, those are my only little things. Aside from that, the film was incredible. I want to spend a few minutes talking about the animation, which I think was so cool. Like, what I loved about the animation, oh, it's getting dark, so sorry. But what I loved about the animation is that it felt 2D, it felt hand drawn, but we know that there was 3D in there, but we couldn't tell. And that's how 3D should be used. It should be used as a way not to distract from the story where you can tell it's 3D, but a way to elevate the storytelling and a way to tell the story in a better way. And they did that so well. They were so well. There were the action scenes, the bending scenes were so cool, and there was a lot of stuff happening in some of the scenes, but I was never lost because of the way the cinematography, I guess you want to call it, or they were cutting from one scene to the next. It was done very beautifully, especially the use of color, and was very strategic to show different emotions, to show different moods. It was done really, really well. There were a lot of references, like I said, I think to Hayao Miyazaki, Studio Ghibli. First, when they were going into the endless storm, when they were passing through those like massive tornadoes and the lightning, it reminded me so much of Lapida Castle in the Sky. If you haven't seen it, you must. It was a film from 1985, and they're going through this like cloud maelstrom thing to get to the castle in the sky, and it was a really interesting, powerful, heightened emotional place in Hayao Miyazaki's film, and it was as well. It felt visually similar, it felt spiritually similar, emotionally similar. So, and also again, like I said, the scene with Katara and Appa, Katara flying off, soaring off Appa onto Aang, and them being in the air for a bit. It was very spiritual, Spirited Away coded, and also some of the creatures, especially on the island, were very Hayao-esque, which I liked. It didn't feel like a copy, obviously. It was very much a nod to it. And I'm sure the creators have once spoken about how Princess Mononoke really influenced them into doing this kind of work. So, I mean, look, the animation was incredible as well because it fed so much of the storytelling. There were massive epic scenes of fighting, beautiful views, especially of Republic City. And there were so many scenes where you can see Aang in the middle of this vast landscape. But then again, there were these small, intimate scenes of close up of a flower, or of like the hand, Gyatso's hand on the back of Aang's head, or of like bending, moments of bending. Like it was, there were so many tones and of it, and emotional tones of it. And the last thing I wanted to say is that I can't believe how good the animation is. That there was a scene. It was a very simple scene where they're on the island and Sokka was leaning back against the airship and he was relaxing, and you can see on the airship the detail of the rust and the paint chipping away and the like mechanical part of the airship, and then how clean Aang looked, how clean Sokka looked, and how the plants looked. And I couldn't believe that an animated film felt more real and realistic than a film that I just watched, The Masters of the Universe, which was so CGI that it was hard to really understand what I was looking at. It just felt like I was looking at a computer game. But this film is an animated film, and it had so much more nuance in the medium that contributed to the storytelling and the world. So, like, kudos to them for creating what I feel like is like a not a new form of animation, but a way that felt like where animation and storytelling and emotional storytelling all like merged into one. So great, amazing, well done. I loved it, is basically what I'm saying. And I cannot wait for Seven Havens, which I'll do another video about. But yeah, that's all I have to say about it. So I wonder if I missed anything from my notes. Oh, one more thing. This would have been epic in the cinema. We should have watched this in the cinema, and it pisses me off that we weren't able to watch the cinema. It annoys me to no extent that this would have been such a magical cinematic experience had it been on the big screen. And I think we deserve that as Avatar fans. Unfortunately, it's not going to happen, but it's still an incredible film. So if you haven't seen it, which is crazy if you are watching this and haven't seen it, then go watch it. Anyway, it's getting dark, so you probably can't see me anymore. But thank you so much for listening. Make sure you like and subscribe on here and on the Substack, on the Culturelist, on Instagram, and all of that stuff. Thank you so much. I will be back soon with another video and a voice note. Bye.